Hi, loves. Welcome to a new episode of the AW Confidential Podcast, the place where nothing is confidential. Today's guest is an executive business coach who helps her clients master their mindset, improve communication, and cope with stress. Jessica Rivera is the founder and CEO of Impact Leadership. Before launching her coaching business, she had success climbing the corporate ladder in a high performance team at Santander Bank and generating a whopping 4 billion in originations, setting a record within the firm. At that time, she was the only woman of color in her division and was facing her share of challenges in a male dominated industry. It forced her to excel and prove her worth. Today, she empowers leaders to drive organizational success. Jessica she just exudes confidence, authenticity, and empowerment. Her energy is contagious. You would never think that she wasn't always like this, but there was a time that she felt unworthy and not as successful as others in the room. She had her own Achilles heel, as we all do. And, if we're going to have this conversation about um, confidence and Achilles heels and unworthiness, I have something to share with you. I have my own Achilles heel that shows up as negativity. I used to think that I was alone in my negative thinking pattern, but it turns out that I am not. Did you know that people have about 60,000 thoughts per day? 75% of these thoughts are negative, and 95% of them are repetitive. Sometimes I find myself waiting for the other shoe to drop. I expect the worst outcome or fear that good things won't happen for me. These thoughts can greatly impact my mental health and affect my confidence. Chances are that if you're listening, you have felt the same way at some point. And if you have, this episode is for you. Hopefully, this can help you and me get out of our own way. Jessica, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for us to have this conversation.
I am too. I mean, it's something that is so relatable, it's so common. One of the things that drew me to you is your confidence. You're so outspoken. And it's hard to imagine that you weren't always like this.
Yeah.
You told me that you went from a shy girl who was terrified of public speaking to now this powerful leader. How did you do this? Where did it all begin? Because it's really hard to imagine.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people would not, even people that have known me forever, would not use the word shy to describe me. But it is how I felt on the inside. And so if we go back to corporate, when I was like an individual contributor, I walked into a room one time and I remember my boss at the time who didn't know how to give feedback. She said to me, "You just walk into a room with your back so straight." I'm like, okay. My dad will probably be happy because he always told us to work on our posture.
My mom.
Right. So I'm like, while I had this amazing ability to appear confident on the outside, but still be like dying on the inside. But when it came to public speaking, definitely not a strong suit for me. And not only public speaking, I think communication in general was not really the strongest suit for me. While I was in sales, which is crazy, I was in sales. One to one was no problem. I can sell a product or an item that I believed in, but when it came to like talking about my personal life, I was very guarded. I remember somebody had told me that they had worked with me for 7 years. He's like, "Jess, I don't know anything about you." I just did not share. There was a big wall up, mainly because I felt like I had done everything wrong, right? I didn't take a traditional route. I was around a lot of people that had gone a traditional route, right? They went to school, then they went to college, they got married, they had kids, and I did everything the opposite way. So I was judging myself, right? So I say all that to say, I still feel like I'm a little bit of a shy extrovert, right? Like I like being around people. I've always loved being around a lot of people, but going up to a stranger and saying, "Hi, my name is not the most comfortable at all."
Now, so I'm gonna dig a little deeper. So in the introduction, I mentioned these negative voices. Do you think that some of those negative voices were sort of getting in your head and hindering you from maybe sharing or maybe just being more of yourself?
Yeah, so we all have a judge, right? That's that voice in our head that tells us everything we're
Mhm.
doing wrong, right? So of course, yeah, he's still there. I call him he. He's still there. He'll still tell me everything I'm doing wrong. But 100%, I think, I always, I grew up in Brooklyn and in Queens, and I felt like I'm, just a regular person. I'm the same person I've always been for the most part. And I always felt like I was an open book, right? Well, not exactly the way other people felt and saw it. And especially in corporate, I kept everything close to the chest. I was actually, I'm also very interested in people. Like that's just who I've always been. I'm like, oh, why do you do that way? What do you like? I'm just interested in other people. So even friends, close friends in my personal life, would tell me, tell what's going on with you? Like I don't I don't know anything that's going on with you. I'm like, nothing's going on with me. That's why. Right. So I think a lot of that were my guards were up. And a lot and
Mhm.
when I think back, it's why do guards go up? Because we get hurt, right? Whether it be our feelings are hurt, whether it be our emotions are hurt, whether we feel like somebody betrayed us. All of that happened to me,
Yeah.
yes. And so and when I think about me as a leader and when I started really doing this work and I wanted my team, really the goal is always to make the person, whoever I'm coaching's life easier. And that was my goal, to make my life easier. So in order for me to make my life easier, I needed to really connect with my team. And so how do you do that? By being open and authentic
Mhm.
and kind of, really connecting on a deeper level. So I had to take those walls down for myself. And I remember one time this guy was leaving the organization and he had been on my team for a while and I thought we had like a really, really great relationship. I was, sad to see him go. And so I said to him, okay, you have nothing to lose anymore. You're leaving the company. So I want you to tell me, what could I have done better as a boss? And he said, well, we had been on the phone about 30 minutes at that point. He's like, if I'm being completely honest, I wish I would have seen more of this person that I've been talking to for the last 30 minutes. And I was
Mhm.
like, what? Like, what do you mean? I'm like, I was so confused. I'm like, I am the same person all the time. He's like, I don't know how to explain it. I just feel like I've been speaking to somebody different the last 30 minutes. And he's like, he really didn't have anything bad to say because we had a really great relationship, but it was the walls that were still up, right? That guardedness that was still there. And when I started chipping away at that, people on my team and in the organization felt closer to me because I was now being myself, right? I didn't feel like I needed to speak a certain way or do a certain thing or keep a guard up or change the subject because now I was just going to be me. And if me meant, I curse, I have a little bit of a potty mouth. If me
All
meant I
good.
cursed sometimes, then I cursed. And I remember my boss, who I had known in different aspects of the organization a very long time. I remember I cursed one time and he was like, wow, you are really worked up, huh? And I was like, no, actually, I'm not worked up at all. This is just how I speak. He had just never heard me curse in all the years he knew me. And I was like, I'm just gonna be myself. And people really started recognizing. We walked out of a meeting one time and this one of my counterparts said, "Who the heck was that in that meeting? Because I've never met her before." I'm like, he's like,
Wow.
you really just like however I delivered the message or I had pushed back in a way that didn't make the other person feel defensive. He was like, I love the way you did that. Like I've never met that version of you before. And I'm like, well, here I am.
So, do you think, because listen, I truly believe that we all have that judge in our head. We do. Now, do you think that hearing that from your old boss, from this person, say, "Okay, I didn't know this you," and it happens to be the authentic you, do you think that was the reason, like, that had an impact and it was the reason that made you kind of make that pivot, or something else happened?
No, so I made the pivot because I wanted to make the pivot for me. I wanted that code switching that we get taught, like, as children,
Yes.
right? We get taught this as, like, little kids, right? So it's like you're one way around your teacher, you're a different way around your gym
Yeah,
teacher than your regular teacher. You're a
yeah.
different way around your mom, your siblings, your friends. You're different. Like, that is taught to us at a very, very young age. It is exhausting,
Oh my gosh.
mentally draining to continuously have to code switch.
And we do it in
Now,
relationships too.
we do it in relationships. We do it in every facet of
Yeah,
our lives, right?
yeah.
And so one of the pivotal moments for me was I was out. I worked in remote sales, so I've been I've been working out of my home office since 2007, and I led teams that way. And so one time we were in upstate New York in Buffalo, and a new person who had joined the organization was coming to meet me there to take these clients out to dinner, whatever. And I remember he was this, or he is a tall black guy, right? And everybody at the table is an older white man. And he was telling these stories that I was like cringing, like, OMG, I cannot believe he's sharing this. And the guys loved it. The clients loved it. They were just like enamored with him. Now, I was like, if it was just he and I, like, there was nothing wrong with what he was saying. But in my head, I'm like, how are you saying this in front of clients? They're not like, they're, like, they're a completely different culture. Like, it was just, my mouth was on the floor. But what I realized, and I had already started doing the work on myself, was that I loved that about him. I loved
Mm.
how authentic he was. I loved that he was just himself. It didn't matter who was in the room. And I said, you know what? I need to be more like that. And that was one of I had already started doing the work on myself, but that was one of the moments that always stick out in my head because I was just like, I just thought he was insane. Like, I just thought, you are crazy for telling these stories. But that's what people loved about him so much. Now, I will say this, typically we have a persona, right? We have two personas. It's like the
Mm.
home and the work. But what I do believe and what I teach my clients is that sometimes, many times, we have got to bring that work persona, the one who watches what they say, who thinks before they speak, who holds their tongue. We need to bring that person home. And sometimes that laid back, chill version of you, you need to bring that person to work. And so I think there's a middle ground there because I don't believe that learning how to communicate means I'm just going to tell you exactly what I think when I think how I think it.
Mm.
I don't think everybody needs to hear what's going on in here, right? And what I do think is that sometimes we just don't shouldn't take ourselves so seriously either. So there's a balance that we have to find because when you think about it, if you've been code switching and placating to whoever is in the room since you were yay high, you have to
Mm.
learn yourself again. Who is my authentic self when I'm at work and when I'm at home? Right? I joke around and I'll be hood or whatever, like around my friends. I probably wouldn't do that in front of a client, but that doesn't mean I'm not being authentic. Oh, and by the way, being authentically yourself does not mean that everybody has to know everything about you. My mother doesn't. My parents know a lot about me. They don't know everything. My kids know a ton about me. They don't know everything about me. My sister, who's my best friend, probably knows 95% of everything. But why does she have to know everything about me? I don't
Mhm.
think that that means because you're authentic. There's real value in privacy.
So, wow, thank you for that, because I feel that that code switching thing is something that I've seen other people do it. I've done it over and over and over again. And the true you gets lost. And there comes a point where honestly, I don't know, I know for me at one point I was like, "Who am I?" You know, I'm this person outside, I'm this other person here, I'm this other person in my relationship. Screw all that. I just need to be me. I just need to hone into that person, you know? So, thank you for sharing that with us. I think when you work in the corporate world, especially for some time, you you see things, you learn things, and you found success as a Latina woman in a male dominated industry. I know how tough that industry can be, and I appreciate how hard you had to climb to get to where you got, because it's a lot of code switching, a lot of pleasing, a lot of, you have to work twice as hard to be seen.
Well, I
So,
think I think I needed to work twice as hard because I always felt like, you know how corporate can be. It's like a lot of brown nosing, ass kissing, all that. Like that's just not in my DNA. Like I just
same girl,
I
same.
couldn't do it. I can't tell you, oh my God, that dress looks so gorgeous on you. When meanwhile I'm thinking to myself, it looks terrible. That's not who I am. So I think that was also part of the problem. Is like I was resisting the system. I'm not playing this corporate game. Right. And so I would just say nothing. And most of the time I would say nothing because it's because you didn't want to know what was going on in here. Right? I didn't have the language to say what I was thinking. So I think that also was part of it, right? I wasn't in the in club, in the cool kids of the corporate world because I'm
Oh,
like, you guys, I have a real life where I have a lot of fun and I don't
this
care
is
about this shit.
all this
I don't care about this shit.
exactly. So do you think, like, I'm wondering what kept you grounded? Because it feels to me, and I didn't know you at the time, but it feels like you stay true to who you were. So how
Mm,
did, because it's that's hard to do. It's almost like you're going against the grain, if you know what I mean.
yeah.
How did what did you hold on to? Because it is hard. I mean, you just kind of, you want that sense of belonging, and it's hard to belong when you know you're different. So how did you stay grounded?
So I think that is part of just kind of who I've been probably always. And so yes, you want to belong. Of course, I wanted to be in the inner circle of because corporate can be like a high school 2.0, right?
Oh, yes.
What's interesting about high school, though, for me, real high school, was that I had like my core group of friends, and I didn't care about anybody else. Like I didn't go to prom, I didn't go to senior trip. Like I made my own senior. I was working at the time
Wow.
already, so I took my own senior trip, and I went to Puerto Rico with my girlfriends for the first time, like on a without adults for the first time, and it was like the best trip ever. So there was part of me like that loner or like I'm just going to gravitate to the
Mm,
people I truly like, not because you can get like I never had that opportunist type of mindset, right? Because that happens in
absolutely.
entrepreneurship and in corporate. It's like, oh, I'm going to be friends with you because I know you could get me to wherever I want to go next. Now, I will say, I think that hurt me. I think that hurt me because when you're part of the inner circle, you do get those like those promotions faster,
Yeah.
right? So I was of the other school of thought where it's like I'm going to put my head down and I'm going to work my ass off, and I don't have to be part of the cool kids because like, in my head I'm like I'm part of the real cool kids in my mind outside of work. Like I go out, I have friends, I have an amazing freaking life outside of work. So I didn't have to feel like I needed to be something like I needed work to fill my soul because I felt like my soul was being filled outside with my family and with my friends.
That's, it is so funny because this was one of my questions, no lie. I was going to ask, so I think we often negotiate or discount our worth to get that promotion, to get that relationship, to get
Yeah.
that prize, whatever the prize is. And it's funny
Yeah.
because you brought it up. So the question was, how do you think that backfired for you in the long run?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it took me longer to get promotions for that reason. It took me longer to get promotions for that because I believe, who knows what they would say now, But I believe that one of the reasons that I got promotions, now I will say in the background, they had to, my bosses had to have supported me some way, somehow, because I
Mm.
couldn't have gotten the promotion without them. But in the front, they were very hard on me. And people would admit that they were harder on me than most. That's what they told me. But my numbers spoke for themselves. That's the beauty about being in sales. My
Mm.
work spoke for itself. My work ethic spoke for itself, right? So I was volunteering for things that were outside of the scope of my job. I would ask to do presentations. I would, even though it would scare the shit out of me, I would still ask. It was like, oh, would you do this? I know nothing about it. Yeah, I know all about it. Then I would do the research, do it, and do the presentation, right? So I forced myself out of my comfort zone. I did it a different way than like just being in the cool kids and kissing somebody's
Mm.
ass. And so I just felt like I think where the other downfall for me, where you don't have to necessarily like kiss anybody's ass, is speak about your worth. Speak about what
What
you're
can you
doing.
share a little bit more? Because, uh, for me, I know for me, I might feel like, well, that makes me feel,
Icky.
like, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it feels icky, it feels weird, it's like, I don't wanna talk about myself, but
Yeah.
and that is something that I help people do, that I definitely help my clients do, even when they're executive level, C-suite level, a lot of people don't feel comfortable speaking about themselves, and a lot of the reason is because they think about that guy that, like, or that woman that it's like all they do is talk about how great they are, and it's like nobody wants to
Yeah,
hear it, like, and you don't wanna be that person.
yeah,
But I think that when we learn how to speak about our successes in a way that feels comfortable for us, in a way that feels like not like I'm bragging, but like it's just what it is, it's just the truth. Oh, and by the way, Yvette, I'm going to also invite you. Tell me what's great about you. Like, tell me what you've been doing. Tell me what you've accomplished lately. It feels different. If I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. I just like got this amazing client, Fortune 500 company. They have 17 billion in revenue, blah, 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 whatever, whatever. And Yvette, tell me what's going on with you. I know you've been doing something great. It feels different for you and for
it
me.
is you're absolutely right. So, how about, let's say a client comes to you and, they want to learn to confidently speak about themselves. What are, let's say, two tips that you can say, okay, because it's a process.
It's a process. It's a process. So number one, I think That I think. Number 1, I would tell them to create what I call a highlight reel. I've been saying not Instagram reel, like, that's what I've been saying this since I was in corporate, and I would even tell my team to do this for me, so or for themselves. So you create a highlight reel. So a highlight reel is like a document. I used to have a document, and every single month I would put 2 or 3 things that I've accomplished. And it's not what I did, it's the impact that I made. So for example, if one thing I was working on was like, um, my communication across different departments, right? Because typically it's like one department's here and the other one's here, and they're always like this. So let's just say their departments are always fighting. So let's say part of my goal was to build better communication across departments. Then I would talk about what I did and the impact that it's making. So for example, let's say I report to my boss and I tell him, last month I set up a call with Yvette, who's the head of blah blah blah, and we're going to go have coffee. So I'm building bridges, right? And that's going to create impact because what is that going to do? That's going to help streamline processes. So it's not about only what you did, right? It's not like, oh, I came in on time every single day because nobody cares about that. It's what is the impact you are making. So create that highlight reel for yourself because come August, you're not going to remember what you did in January. And guess who's not going to remember either? Your boss. That's not their job. Their job is not to remember what you did great. That was the other mistake that I made. We're waiting for somebody else to advocate for us. That's not how this works. You have to advocate for yourself so that when you and the other department really hit it off, it's not that's not something that happened overnight. It wasn't just over one cup of coffee. It was you making effort to build that relationship and then build streamline the processes to make sure that the process gets better.
Well, it's like, I used to wait for that validation. And now, I'm like, no, I don't need you to tell me how good I am. I know. I know.
Well, it is, but it's more than that at work, right? Because you do need their validation because
That's
it's
true. You
going
want
to
those
matter. It's going to matter at your year-end
at
review.
the end
It's
of
going
the
to matter
year.
for
Yeah.
your merit raise. It's going to matter for your bonus.
Mhm.
It is going to matter. So in this case,
Mhm.
and yeah, sure, I am like you don't need validation, but in this case, you do. So it's more about making the business case. Okay, yeah, you're great. No, tell me
I
more.
like that, making the business case. I love that.
Yeah, we
That's
have to remove the emotions, right? Because it's
you're
not like, oh my God, I'm great.
that's a
Okay,
good
yeah, you're
point.
great. Hmm.
Ah, okay. So, as far as that negativity that lives in our head, I think it lives in everyone's head, by the way, and it creeps its little head. It's like, it's almost like how I know I've seen cartoons, the little devil and the little angel,
Hmm.
and that negativity creeps in
Hmm.
for all of us, no matter
Yep.
how confident we are. So,
Yep.
when negativity creeps in for you, what do you do?
Well, I believe that it'll never go away, right? Because
Mhm.
that's just,
Yeah.
and there's value in that though, right? There's value in in you thinking, okay, well, maybe I didn't do this so well. Maybe I could do it a little bit better. It's about how far do you let that stretch and when do you make it stop, right? So when we
Mhm.
think a negative thought, they say 17 seconds, or I think it's like 15 seconds, another negative thought will come behind it,
Mhm.
and so on and so on. And we allow that kind of snowball effect to happen. Well, we could do it the other way too, right? And so it's like, okay, I I should have changed my shirt on that podcast interview, and like, damn, and then my hair didn't look good, and then the like, or that could happen. That could
Yes.
happen. Or it's like, ah, I should have changed my shirt for that podcast interview. All right, on the next one, I'll do that.
Okay.
Right? So it's like, am I allowing that snowball effect to happen or am I
Mm.
stopping it? Because by the way, a lot of those times, number one, the bullshit we tell ourselves sometimes isn't even true, right? Because it could
Fact.
be, I could say, oh my God, Yvette must have thought I was an idiot for leaving that t-shirt on for that podcast interview. I made that story all the way up in my head and I can
Mhm.
run with that, right? So that's that part. The other part is like, okay, maybe that is true, but I can always change it next time. Like it's not that big of a deal. So I really don't take myself all that seriously because it's like, okay, like who cares? Nobody cares.
I
Like
love
it's not
that.
that big of a deal.
We need to do more of that. We need to do more of that.
Mhm.
So, Jessica, one of the things that I have been doing, I just started doing this, is I'm playing this game called We Connect. And I am going to pick a card out of this little deck. And I'm going to just ask you a surprise question, not written down, not rehearsed. I'm just going to pull a card.
Okay, I love it.
Let's have a little fun. Okay, here it is. If you could give one piece of advice to a large group of people, what would it be?
One piece of advice to a large group of people is that you are more powerful than you think you are. And there's power in your words, there's power in your presence. And so be more thoughtful about your words and know that your presence matters.
I can't top that. That was beautiful. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
That was good. That was really good. Wow.
Thank
And
you.
it's on the fly. So, one of the things that I love to do for every interview, I like to end our conversations with a quote, mantra, or piece of advice. You've given us a piece of advice. I would love for you to give us a quote or a mantra that you use for
Mhm.
anyone who is lacking or just can't get that confidence, whether it's confidence to ask for a raise, confidence
Mhm.
to end a relationship, confidence to speak up, and lend their voice to whatever cause, or just confidence. What is that one mantra or quote that you can share that would help? I'm all about quotes and mantras.
Yeah, I like it. So I don't know if this is for confidence, but I know that this is what's coming to mind. Uh, when I was going through something a while ago, the mantra that I had in my mind and will still have if I'm thinking, like, if I'm not having a great day, is like, or things aren't going my way, life is happening for me. And
Mm.
right. So life is just, I was going through this thing one time and somebody was giving me information that I did not want to hear. And the only thing that was replaying in my mind is this is happening for me. Life is happening for me, not to me. Life is happening for me. And then if you take it a step further, since life is happening for me, then this is always directing me to the next better thing, to the next best thing, to something great. There's something great about to happen, even though what I'm hearing right now is not what I want to hear.
I have a note on my keyboard right here. I keep this right here. It says everything is always working out for me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
another great mantra.
Thank you so much, Jessica. This was so amazing. I could talk to you for hours, as I mentioned earlier. I want to make sure that we know how to find you, where to learn more about you. Can you share with our listeners?
Yes. I hang out on Instagram at Coach Jessica Rivera. That's where I hang out the most. Come hang out with me in my stories, and I go live and do all the things. And then I'm also on LinkedIn at Jessica Rivera, but my name is very common, so I would put Jessica Rivera like New York or Coach or both.
Absolutely. And we'll make sure we include it in the notes. Thank you so much for sharing your story and sharing your incredible insight. What your Instagram? Repeat it again one more time.
It's Coach Jessica Rivera, and I have some retreats coming up, so they can definitely look out for that. And I will be opening the doors to my coaching program soon. It's
Yay.
closed right now, but yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you for joining us. And thank you, loves, for joining us on this episode of AW Confidential Podcast. Talk to you soon.